the standard view of evolutionary biology developed ever since August Weismann in the end of the 19th century and right the way through the 20th century is that all variations in the hereditary material, whatever it was found to be, was assumed to be random, and the only way, therefore, in which an organism could develop that has functionality would be through natural selection, selecting out the good organisms, as it were, and eliminating the bad organisms. And it's been a question ever since whether that very strict separation between pure randomness at the level of the genetic material followed by natural selection is really correct. How did the approach that I favour, the integrative approach, become sidelined in the second half of the 20th century? And the answer to that, of course, is that we were all of us, I include myself because I started off in this camp, we were all attracted to an oversimplified view of the logic of living systems. The mantra we all use, from molecules to man, and notice that's a one-way process. And the problem is this can't be true. Molecules simply aren't alive. And the person who really got it all going in relation to modern molecular biology is Schrödinger, who is greatly acknowledged by both Watson and Crick. And what he did was to propose, first of all, quite correctly, that physics deals with order from disorder. He went on to say biology is completely different because it's order from molecular order. And so the big question is, does biology generate order from molecular order? I would contrast to Schrödinger's view and say that biology must also be generating order, function, from disorder. Life is a process, not fully programmed at the molecular level. I think we are beginning to understand now that there are ways in which organisms can actually use stochasticity to generate function, and therefore evolution can be, to some extent, directional. I see that as being used by organisms in a very effective way because it gives organisms the possibility of choosing which cells are most appropriate to the function that the population needs to subserve. Stochasticity necessarily coexists with functionality, and they exist at different levels. A purely neo-Darwinist mechanism at one level, at the genome level, what you're seeing is random mutation followed by natural selection. Over and above that, there is targeting of the process that enables it to be possible to generate functionality from the random behavior. It's also possible for organisms to respond to stress in the environment by reorganizing genomes. First discovered by Barbara McClintock, she was actually told about 1957 that she shouldn't continue to publish on that process because people simply didn't believe what she had found. What she had found was that great chunks of the genetic material could move from one chromosome to the other in response to environmental stress. 30 years later, in 1983, she was awarded the Nobel Prize at the age of 81 precisely for the discovery of mobile genetic elements. And she wrote in her Nobel Prize lecture published in Science that the genome is a highly sensitive organ of the cell, monitoring genomic activities and correcting common errors, sensing the unusual and unexpected events and responding to them, often by restructuring the genome. Has that happened? Well, if we look at the sequencing of many different species done by the Human Genome Project and published in Nature in 2001, and you look at a range of proteins from yeast to worm to fly, right the way through to the human, and this is looking at the domains that exist in chromatin proteins, whole domains have moved around. This was precisely, of course, Barbara McClintock's discovery. Now, the point here is that whole domains have functionality. You have a much bigger chance of getting new functionality if you're combining bits of the genome that already have functionality. If you look at the genome level where the mutations are occurring, you will see random variation, you will also see natural selection. But if you look at it from a high-level perspective, a functional perspective, you will see that the targeted nature of the hypermutation is precisely what gives the functionality. So I would say that organisms have evolved the ability to respond in functional ways to environmental change. Stochasticity is completely compatible with functionality at a high level. Physics taught us that right from the beginning. But stochasticity can be harnessed by organisms, and they can do it in a way that generates physiological, functionally significant ways of responding to stress in the environment. Thank you very much.